Hello, beautiful soul, and welcome to the Little Reader's House. I'm the Little Reader, your humble host, also known as Amanda, and this is my rock. Actually, it's petrified wood, and it's very appropriate for today's masterclass / transmission. Something I would love to share with you, and which is very appropriate at this moment, is to let you know that you're so very worthy of love. Always more. Never less. That's just the facts around here. Everything else, up for grabs, up for debate. I love a good debate. And up for fun. So I invite you to take a deep breath in. Let her go. Another one. Deep breath in. Let it out. Drop them shoulders. Find a place to sit or lie down, or if you're a disembodied spirit, hover in peace and prepare thyself for a class. I'm looking at my props here and I can't believe it. I'm so excited to channel, transmit, and share this information with you. And the reason I say channel and transmit is because you don't need to fully intellectually understand a damn thing that I'm going to say. All you need to do is get comfortable, relax, open your heart, open your mind, and let these little wisdoms soak into you, my darling. Let them just pet and tickle and uplift your soul. Because that's the purpose of all of this. In this house, at the end of the day, we're not turning you into a scientist necessarily, unless you want to be one. We're simply spreading the love. And I'm sharing the experiences that I, as your humble, psychic, sensitive, energetically oriented human being, have accumulated over time and intensity. And I'm just passing that on to you so that you can be with it and do with it whatever you please. So take all the pressure off. If you have a pen and you have a paper, then go ahead and take notes. That's fine if that's something you're inclined to do. But again, keep it light. Keep it fun. Today we're talking about how to become yourself. How to become yourself, beautiful soul. What the hell does that mean? Aren't I already myself? Yes and no. When you become yourself, you become something Spirit refers to as the unknown archetype. It's the full expression of what you were made, make no mistake, made, crafted to be. And each of us in our lifetime will express some version of ourself. But think of it like a dial of intensity. You can think of this as a light that has a intensity dial. And when the light is on low, it's like the very lowest level, it's dim. And if you turn the volume or the voltage or the amperage, oh shit, it's getting scientific, up on that light, the light gets brighter and brighter and brighter. And it's very cool. You can use that adjuster, that dial, to turn the light dim, to turn the light off, to turn the light on, and to turn the light up. You are like that light, beautiful soul. And in this perfect tapestry created by Spirit, there are no failures, there are no mess-ups. I know that hurts to hear because, speaking for myself personally, one of my favorite judgmental, aggressive insults that this mind and this patterning likes to hurl at this heart is, you're worthless, you're a failure, you never do enough, you never are enough. You and I might have that in common. Maybe not. Maybe that's not one of yours. Everyone's got their thing. But in this universe, objectively speaking, from Spirit's point of view, it's not possible to fail. It's not possible to not be yourself. So take the weight off of you completely. You're doing a perfect job simply existing, simply being. As long as you're alive, that is Spirit's sign off on the statement that you are necessary and needed to keep this entire universe in balance. No you, no universe. That's Spirit's so-called objective perspective. However, we are not objective beings, are we? We are subjective beings having the experience of humanness, of separation. We don't have that perspective where everyone's perfect, everything's chugging along. We feel failure. We feel insufficiency. We feel confusion. We feel lack. We feel stress. We feel anger. We feel resentment. We feel it all. That's the human experience. And in the course of that human experience, you can imagine that some intermediary has a hand on the dial of that light we talked about earlier. And we're turning the light from dim to bright, to dim to bright, to dim to bright, to dim to bright. Dim is when we're feeling low. We're feeling weak. We're feeling worthless. We're feeling insignificant. We're feeling unseen. We're feeling lonely. It's okay. High voltage, bright light is when we're feeling seen. We're feeling honored. We're feeling known. We're flowing. We're creating, perhaps. We're surrounded by faces, voices, eyes, sensations, energies that ignite our being. We're in purpose. The light is bright. But it's important to mention that that's subjective experience. From Spirit's POV, you are always at 100% brightness. You are always at 100% worthiness. You are always the brightest light. Don't try to make sense of that, because immediately, like, compared to who? Brightest compared to you? No, just the brightest light that you can be. But to us, to our subjective experience, that's not how it feels. So where we have the so-called free will choice, if you even believe in that sort of thing, darling, and that will be another talk for another time. There's already a video about it here, but maybe more to come on that. Where your free will comes in is that you get to choose the way your experience feels. Not even necessarily the way that it goes. Damn it. But the way that it feels. Which, interestingly, from Spirit's POV, is even more important than the way that it goes. The way that it feels is the ultimate power. Because you could have the best circumstances, according to who? Someone, in the world, and it feel like an absolute steaming pile of shite, darling. Or you could have objectively the worst circumstances in the world and feel like you have and are God's gift to this universe. So you see how the feeling of the human experience might matter? Yeah. Have a think on that, my love. So that's what this class is all about. Today's masterclass is about how to become yourself, not so that you're impressing anybody, not so that you're rich and famous, not so that you reach your potential and you make the most of this life. That's a great productivity-oriented narrative, but that's kind of where it falls short. And when you find yourself in chronic illness or injured, or in a state where you can't do anymore, that whole idea of making the most of your life kind of goes out the window. So let's not do that thing where we have to become ourselves so that we can be worthy of love, either from life itself and the people in it, or the divine source. I must make the most of my potential so that God loves me. That's not what this is about. The reason you're going to become yourself as the result of today's masterclass is for no other reason than to feel how absolutely magnificent it is to be you. To turn the dial up on the brightness of the light within here, in your heart, so that you, firsthand, can feel the divine. So that you firsthand aren't asking questions about, am I guided? Am I loved? Am I protected? Is there a higher force? Do I even have a purpose? What's all this shit for anyway? When the light is dialed up in here and you're having the feeling experience of you in all your you-ness, it actually makes this life worth living. It actually makes this life a joy, even with all the weird shit going on this planet. And that's a judgment, so sorry, table. I'm getting excited. That's a judgment. Weird shit for some, best times ever for others. You know what I'm saying? So, let's get into it. I can't wait to show you some of the stuff that I've hand-drawn for you. But we're going to start with a basic premise. There are 2 steps in this process to becoming thyself. Compartmentalize is step 1. Decompartmentalize is step 2. So, if you're doing this, compartmentalize, step 1. Decompartmentalize, step 2. That's all there is to it. That's how to become yourself. Boom. Like a DNA helix, or the rising and setting of the moon or sun, or the fluctuation of the seasons, or the beat of your heart, or the inhala and exhala of your lungs. It's rhythmic. So over the course of your life, it's likely that you will compartmentalize and decompartmentalize a few times. You may have already done so without knowing it. And I'll talk about what I mean in a second. It all begins with the premise of archetypes. Now, there are classic archetypes, and as a tarot aficionado, which you may also be, you probably already know so many of them. But I'll just throw a few out there. The Empress archetype, the Emperor archetype, the Hermit archetype, the Sun as an archetype, the Moon as an archetype, the Father, the Mother, the Maiden, the Crone. These are examples of classic archetypes. And over the course of history, we've looked at those archetypes because they're so pure. Because if I say to you, the Father, that denotes or suggests some very specific bullet points of energy. Masculine, projective, protective, structured. If I say to you, the Mother, immediately you know. Nurturing, soft, sweet, tender, also protective, but in a different way. You've already learned how to associate paternal and maternal with archetypes, even without knowing it. These are the classic archetypes. And again, historically, we've looked at them because they're so specific. They're so pure. They're so archaic. Although archetypes provide a great springboard for our intellectual understanding of diversity and difference. In other words, archetypes give us the opportunity to compare and contrast energies. Once you understand the Father, you inherently understand the Mother as its inverse, and vice versa. Once you understand the Crone, you have an understanding of the Maiden and how they're different and how they're similar. Understanding archetypes gives you a fundamental ability to classify and discern energies. And understanding archetypes is key. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. Understanding archetypes is key for understanding you. Because baby, you're an archetype. You're the unknown archetype. You're the undiscovered archetype. See, within every human being is the opportunity for an archetype that has never existed before. How does this work? It's very much like DNA and genetics, and spiritually speaking, the two are very linked. Ancestrally, every human being has a genetic makeup that supports the presence of certain archetypal energies over others. Are you tracking with me here, darling? Oh, there's so much to say on that topic. It's been the fascination of many a soul to attempt to manipulate the expression of the human spirit by manipulating genetics. When I say becoming more yourself, I want you to fundamentally understand that what we're not doing is optimizing or changing anything about you. We're not trying to make you more one way or more another. Bring out one archetype over another. We're simply trying to allow the you that already exists in this moment, which is perfect, which is immaculate. Don't worry, darling. I know these words are strongly positive. If you can't believe them, just be open to the possibility that they could be true. What we're trying to do in this masterclass is allow your you-ness to come out unfiltered and flawless. Because if we were to dial up the experience of what it is to be you to 100% bright light radiating, you would feel purposeful, validated, unique, necessary, and ineffably grateful to be alive. You would understand your place, your dharma, as it were. So, let's gently kiss the idea of optimizing, perfecting, and turning you into a specific archetype and send it away. Because as we get more into the nuances and gray areas of this conversation, it's critical, mission critical, that you understand the perfection of the unknown archetype which you represent is inherent. Don't fuck with it. Great. Good talk. Within your body, within this structure, are propensities, leanings toward specific archetypes. But that doesn't make you one archetype. Even if you're a father, or a mother, or a maiden, or a hermit, you are not that archetype alone. Those archetypes were born and died the moment they were committed to the books. The moment, just like when language is written and it's turned to stone, because language, according to my linguistics professor way back in the day, is meant to be ever evolving. It's alive. Once it's committed to paper or to a dictionary or it's defined, it begins a slow death. The same is true of an archetype. Once something is defined, it's locked in. So notice that steps 1 and 2 of this process are compartmentalizing and then decompartmentalizing. It's going to give you a little hint about where we're headed. No matter whether you stay in all day, you're not the hermit. No matter whether you have children, you're not the father or mother archetype. You are a series of sub archetypes. They live in you, darling. Multiples. Parts. How do they get there? And can you choose them? They get there because, in a way, they're your karma. Not your dharma, but your karma. Something you're meant to resolve, to bring light to turn the dial up on that bright light within you, and essentially, as you travel through time in this human experience, transcend them. So you will go beyond your sub-archetypes. But how the hell did they get there to begin with? They're often assigned to the body, DNA, ancestral stuff. It could be trauma. It could be memory. It could be purpose that was shunted from your ancestors to you because no one back there wanted to do it. Didn't have the time, didn't have the energy, didn't have the resources. So boop, 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 boop. It gets all pushed forward to you. It's a lot of fun to look at different generations and see what they're processing that their predecessors didn't want to do. Fun exercise. They also come from you directly. Your preferences, your desires, although we could argue that your preferences and desires also arise from ancestral historical patterning. They come from your environment. They come from where you've been positioned in your life. There's your dharma popping up. So your purpose or the function that you serve in the bigger picture at this current stage of your existence. But they're not yours to bend and mold and play with yet. Before you get to any shifting or trying to be or trying to become, we're simply looking at what's already there. So how'd they get there? Kind of by default, not something to control. Can you change them? I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it because it can be an act, and often is an act of resistance rather than an act of acceptance and love. And we'll talk more about that coming up soon. Oh, I'm sorry, table. I get excited. So I'm looking at all these props here, and I'm telling you that you are many archetypes. Guess what? I created a visual just for this moment. You are many archetypes. Wow, it's reversed in the screen. Hopefully it doesn't come out like that later. See, I've written many archetypes. And we have A, B, C, D, and E. What your assignment is to understand that you have sub-archetypes, not just a single self, not just empress, mother, maiden, hermit, or throw in some other traditional archetypes. You are all of these aspects simultaneously. You're not one or the other. You're multiple parts, many archetypes. And I'm going to give you an example. Me. So, I wrote baseline at the bottom of both of these examples because your archetypes change over time. Your sub-archetypes, the elements of self within you. They're always shifting, always moving in terms of their percentage and in terms of what they are. But this is typically a slow movement over time. So I'll read out to you, for example, some of the archetypes that live within me. And then, if you've got a pen and a paper, I recommend drawing yourself a circle and starting to identify aspects of you. If you don't have names for your sub-archetypes yet, that's okay. You can just write A, B, C, D, E, or leave spaces empty. The objective here is to recognize that you are the unknown archetype, undefined at this point in time. You are subdivided by many small archetypes. Those often are non-traditional archetypes because, as we discussed, traditional archetypes are already written, they're already predefined, and they're of a simpler time. As time progresses, gray area expands. The distance between the binary increases and decreases in such a way that it becomes impossible to oversimplify and say it's simply this or it's simply that. Simply black or it's simply white. You are more than that. So looking at my chart, let's say I'm at baseline. So it's a day when I'm just passing through various activities, and this chart is the average of that day, meaning we're not looking at me during a specific activity. We're looking at me over the course of a day, most days as an average. You don't have to get too mathematical with this. My God, please don't. Not in my name, not in my honor. Instead, play with it and understand that your sub-archetypes are different expressions of the self, the totality of who you are, but sliced. I'll give you some examples. For me, Amanda, I am, according to this chart, 25% the little reader. According to this chart, I'm 12.5% tiny tenacity, 12.5% zombie head, 25% silent master, and 25% master seducer. Who put that in there? Huh. This indicates that there are 5 sub-archetypes living in me. The little reader is self-explanatory, is it not? Here I am before you, entertaining, teaching, transmitting energy. But the little reader is more than just something I do for you, although it is that. It's a feeling experience that I, Amanda, am having. And depending on whether I'm in the activity of teaching, transmitting, and entertaining, or I'm in the activity of doing something totally different, grocery shopping, for example, I will know whether I am expressing the little reader energy. Tiny tenacity, 12.5%, according to that chart, is an aspect of self that is like a 9-year-old. Tiny tenacity is an energy that is fire-like. It's Sagittarian. In light, it is tenacious. It is big picture oriented. It is fiery. It is charismatic. It is sassy. It can be a little edgy, and in many ways is childish, naive, and innocent. On the shadow side, tiny tenacity is stubborn, obnoxious, mean, bratty, tantrum-oriented. It's the aspect of self that wakes up from a nap groggy and wants to throw everything, turn furniture over, hurl mud pies, eat mud pies. There's a lot to it. But that's tiny tenacity, and that is an archetype, a sub-archetype that lives in me. Notice that it isn't a traditional archetype. It is, in essence, modeled after traditional archetypes, but refined for the specific feeling experience of being me. And I know the difference between when I'm the little reader or when I'm embodying tiny tenacity. And ultimately, my love, this is the moment that you understand that you are a channel. And these sub-archetypes that live within you are what you're channeling at any given time. Let's keep going with the example here. Zombie head, 12.5% of the time. I made that one up for the purposes of this chart. Can't reveal all my secrets, darling. But let's just say that Zombie Head is a complete slug version of this. It has no shadow, it has no light. It mostly sleeps and rolls around. And then sleeps and rolls around. And then mostly sleeps and rolls around. And then maybe it eats from time to time. And these allocations of percentages are rough estimations, guesstimations of how much control that sub-archetype has over me. The Little Reader, 25%. Tiny Tenacity, 12.5%. Zombie Head, 12.5%. Now, I don't do math. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's 50%. The other two remaining, the Silent Master and the Master Seducer, make up 50% of my baseline. This means that on any given day, I could find myself slotted into either of those energetic experiences. Which do you think that I'm in now, my sweet friend? Yes, you're correct. The Little Reader. I know. You said Master Seducer. I love you for it. The Little Reader. In activity, you will find that you channel a different sub-archetype. Right now, allegedly, I'm channeling 97.682% of the Little Reader, and then there's a sliver of mystery, 2.318%. What that could be, it could shift, it could change. Maybe I'm a little bit Tiny Tenacity right now, or a little bit Silent Master. We don't know. All we know is that this whole is fragmented up into unique archetypes, and it is up to you to decide, to determine, to assess, but as objectively and neutrally as possible, what the sub-archetypes are that live in you. There could be so many more than 5. There could be 10. There could be 50. That would be a lot of thin slices. There could be 2. There could be 1. But you know what? I'm going to put some money on it and say, it ain't 1, baby, and it ain't 2. Even 5 is probably an oversimplification. So what are we doing here when we recognize our sub-archetypes? We're recognizing that we are all many, that we have different stories, different wounds that come from ancestral history, present-day lived experience, and what other random variable that spirit throws in there. We're not trying to change them. I'm not trying to be something other than what I am. One must accept the sub-archetypes and get to know them and meet them over the course of your human experience. How do you do it? Great question. You watch yourself, my love. You learn yourself. Like a student, you begin to witness how you are in different scenarios. What archetype are you at work? Or are you a couple or a throuple over the course of your workday? What archetype are you at home? Name them, and name them uniquely if you like. You could give them A, B, C, D, E, or you could give them Tiny Tenacity and the Silent Master. Whatever you like, whatever captures the personality. It will be a unique personality. You will be different depending on whether you're on the road driving or whether you're preparing for sleep with your children at the end of the day. Or if your children are in the car while you're on the road driving, you might be the same archetype. What does that tell you? Each archetype is an entire persona. The Little Reader is far different than the Silent Master, although the two may work together, and they often do. Silent Master, Little Reader, to transmit and exchange information between one another. There are partitions here. There are walls that divide these from one another. They are noticeably different to you in your lived experience. Why? Why is that so? Because we're taught to compartmentalize. Because our mind runs on an operating system that must put things into boxes, that must judge, that must discern. And that's precisely why at the beginning of this process, we let it rip. We compartmentalize. We build walls. We understand that each sub-archetype within us has a personality, has needs, has desires, has a unique age. The little reader is like 50 years old. The silent master, 650. Tiny tenacity, 8.5. The master seducer, 42. Zombie head, unknown. You do not need to have the same age for every sub-archetype. You can begin to let yourself be truly different in different scenarios and no longer judge yourself for it. As you compartmentalize, do so joyfully. Let yourself off the hook, because the next step in the process of becoming yourself, my sweet love, is reparenting each and every one of your sub-archetypes. The next step, once you've put it on paper, you've created the circle, you've identified what you are, when, and why. You've even romanticized, drawn a backstory up for them, talked about when they originated. I can tell you exactly when tiny tenacity originated in this conglomeration. Maybe down to the year, down to the day, down to the month. It was a defining moment of life that fragmented a piece off, and it became that. Your goal after compartmentalizing and understanding each and every piece of you and why it's there is to reparent it. What does that mean? It means that when you're with each archetype, you begin to shift away from embodying them in the moment to watching them in the moment, witnessing them, act out their patterns, whatever they may be. You take a step back and you become the observer, and they become the child, no matter whether they're 650 years old or 5. Your sub-archetype becomes a character. Real, absolutely, because it's an aspect of you. But you step into the role of the greater whole, and you begin to caretake and advocate for and fight for that sub-archetype's needs. Your only job when reparenting your sub-archetypes is complete acceptance. You stand tall in your discipline, in your integrity, in your values, and you allow whatever sub-archetype is rising at the moment that you're in it to do its thing. They'll all have different needs. The silent master needs to meditate, sometimes for hours a day. So I let it. Tiny tenacity often has tantrums, fits. They can turn into fits of rage, although they're tiny, but they're there. The greater whole, the other remaining percent, steps back and watches. You don't necessarily let the sub-archetype reign and control you. You, as the parent, as the caretaker, begin to control it. So what does that look like on an average day? It looks like constantly witnessing. across different activities, across different situations, in different conversations. It's a line of self-inquiry that opens and never stops. And even if you're in the moment, just being there, present in the moment, not thinking, not watching what you're doing. A lot of us want to let ourselves off the hook by saying, well, I don't want to think while I'm in the moment because that takes me out of the moment. True witnessing isn't about thinking what you're doing. It's not trying to micromanage or hyperfixate and hyper-control yourself real tight in the moment. It's about witnessing the unfolding as the pattern plays. So once this line of self-inquiry begins, you're simply watching yourself in different scenarios, in different moments, being. And then you compartmentalize and you categorize and you go, okay, just there, I was tiny tenacity for that 15 minutes. Noted. Here's what triggers that. And here's what I can do next time that energy arises to love it, to reparent it, to embrace it. Not to make it go away, my love. Not to change it. To love it. Your goal is complete, unconditional acceptance of each of the sub-archetypes that you are, especially for paradox aspects of the self, seemingly opposite archetypes. Now, it's no mystery, secret, or mistake that I put the silent master here and the master seducer here. Both made up names for the purposes of this. They are, perhaps to the judgment of some, absolute opposites. A silent master is sitting in the lotus position, meditating for hours on end. The master seducer may be sitting in the lotus position, but baby, they're not meditating. How can these two coexist? This is where we get into the magic. The magic of unconditional acceptance of your seemingly paradoxical sub-archetypes is where you begin to crystallize as the unknown archetype. This is where you step into phase 2, decompartmentalization. You start with compartmentalizing, defining, assessing, witnessing, and then loving. You define, you assess, you witness, and then you love everything that pops out within you. And you say, oh, that's this archetype, that's this one. That's this archetype, that's this one. We don't judge them. We understand their origin story. Some may be villains. Some may be heroes. Some may be zombie head, unknown. No moral compass there. There's just not much going on there. Either way, we take it into our arms. We kiss it on the head. And we love the shit out of it. Something really interesting happens when you start to do that. When you begin to do that, the partitions of your sub-archetypes start to dissolve. They erase. Suddenly, with this unconditional acceptance and this witnessing of the transitions between the sub-archetypes being expressed in you at any given moment, suddenly, the silent master and the master seducer become the silent master seducer. And suddenly the little reader is part of that. And tiny tenacity is part of that. And zombie head is part of that. As the walls thin and cracks begin to run through those partitions, the decompartmentalization process organically unfolds. It is not forced. It is not pushed on you. It is not insisted upon so that you can reach a higher state of being and become, again, fame and fortune. And we'll talk about that in a minute, the fame and the fortune aspect. When your walls between the many selves within you dissolve as a result of unconditional self-love, sympathy for self, care for self, and advocacy for self. You remove all fear of self. And that is what decompartmentalizes you. That is what sets you free. And when the walls have disappeared from the partitions of your sub-archetypes, you become one. You become whole. Full-time, no matter what activity you're in, you are 100% you. This is 100% Amanda Dollinger, middle name redacted. This level is reached when there is no longer any judgment between which sub-archetype is arising within you. There is no preference for one because you secretly judge it to be better than the rest. Oh, I like the Little Reader a lot more than Zombie Head. The Little Reader made me money. And, I like the Silent Master more than the Little Reader because the Silent Master, according to my books, is spiritually preferable. That's the one that will get me on the good side of the big guy. All that meditation I do. Just makes me so superior. Actually, it's the Master Seducer for me. That got me something better than money. You see how we develop these preferences. And we develop the preferences based on our own stories, based on the stories that the world tells us, based on what's celebrated outside of us, based on what allegedly does make money or doesn't make money. And what happens in life typically is that most of us will never meaningfully compartmentalize our sub-archetypes. We'll never study the multitude of fragmented energies that exist within us. We'll never take the time to understand the backstory. How did this one get here and how did that one get there? We'll just let it all be a dish with the ingredients thrown in. When interestingly, we have a chance, if we deconstructed the dish, to see and understand and appreciate every ingredient, and then understand what that dish is, how long it wants to be cooked for, if it even gets cooked. You would not stick sushi hand rolls in the oven, and yet we have millions of people on this planet who don't understand that they're a sushi hand roll. And because society says you need to be baked in the oven for 45 minutes, they're sticking themselves in the oven to be cooked. What that analogy means is that without an understanding of self and sub-archetypes, not only will you never become your unknown archetype and fully experience yourself as a whole, you'll never understand the nuance, the specificity, the diversity, the contrast, the paradoxes, the opposites, allegedly, that exist within you even right now as you watch me on this screen. You have aspects of self that may be at war with one another. You have aspects of self with desires that have been buried for years. And the truth is that all of those aspects of self can live in harmony with one another. All of those aspects of self can coexist and thrive, just as a home with multiple people in it can live in harmony when they all share the same value. What is that value? What are those values? Do you understand that if you build sympathy and love for your sub-archetypes, you can understand what each of them want, and you can find commonality? You can find commonality between every single one of those. And the first place to start, the first place that Tiny Tenacity, Zombie Head, Silent Master, Master Seducer, and the Little Reader all share a commonality, is that they all want, yes, you guessed it, love. They all want love. They're not enemies of one another. They're the most complementary, beautiful dish you can imagine. And there's only one of this in the entire universe. There is only one of you with all your sub-archetypes in this entire universe. When you remove all fear of self, none of your sub-archetypes scare you anymore. You don't worry about how the world may see them. You simply accept. The judgment dies. When that happens, the decompartmentalization process is complete. The walls fall away and you become one, no longer split by parts. You can pull up the energy of any of those sub-archetypes at will, and you can reparent them, love them, guide them, nourish and nurture them at will. They become your first children, irrespective of your gender, irrespective of your age. They become the priority, and you are their caretaker. When that happens, you become the unknown archetype. You turn the dial up on your brightness. Kind of like my light just went off now. You turn the dial all the way up on your brightness. You become something that has never, ever existed before and never, ever will. And you're able to feel it, all of its power, completely. When you do this, you become unstoppable. You become the master of your domain. You have transcended the sub-archetypes and become that which you are. And when you do that, interestingly, the fame and the fortune, as examples, and all that you desire begin to magnetize toward you, irrespective of your manifestation style, whether you're passive or active. The opportunities, the impulses, the drive, the direction, the purpose, the values, they all crystallize and they all turn into an unignorable voice that guides you down your path. Think of those written in the history books, for better or for worse. Don't judge them. Just think of them for a second. Index them. While there may be some similarities between this person and that person, whether they're a Hollywood star or a president, the reason they rise and shine at that level of brightness is because they became their own unknown archetype. They became the one. That is what you have the opportunity, the privilege, and the gift of doing at this moment in time and space, at this juncture of time, space, reality, darling. Here we are, right here. And you have the opportunity to realize yourself, to become the unknown archetype, and to have a hell of an adventure doing it. That is the best way to encompass the practice of know thyself. And the fruits of self-realization and self-love are sweet indeed, my friend. So, start compartmentalizing. And then start loving and accepting. And then watch the decompartmentalizing process unfold faster than you can anticipate, faster than you can imagine. as you throw love to and from your multiple selves, until all that's left there is you. Something beautiful, something whole, and something so very worthy of love. Always more, and never less. That is where we're leaving it today for today's Masterclass Tuesday. It has been an honor and a delight holding space with you, my sweet friend. Until we meet again, I'm sending you all of the love I've got. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please comment. If you have questions, I'm always around. And if you want to be back here for next Tuesday's Masterclass, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe, do the notification bell. You want to be notified, right? Of course you do. So until then, my sweet friend, bye for now.